Let's bring in now Fox News senior judicial analyst Judge Andrew Napolitano as we continue to watch the White House. Judge, always great to see you. I really want to pick your brain with this first question. And I've been talking about the differences between a Rosenstein, whether it's today or a later date, actually resigning or the president firing him. Can you drill down farther?
Well, if the president fires Rosenstein, he'll be disregarding the advice of many Republicans, not the least of whom was Mitch McConnell, who last week said, please dial back on the tweets about Dr. Christine Blasey Ford, and please don't disrupt the Justice Department, because that is going, and don't do any of this before the midterms, because either of those things are going to make our job confirming Judge Kavanaugh more difficult and our job trying to keep the Senate and the House more difficult. On the other hand, if the president were to fire Rod Rosenstein, or if he were to resign, he is Jim Comey's best witness on the obstruction of justice charges, because he was there when the president said, come up with and give me a basis to justify firing Comey. Here's what I want to do. Here's really why I want to do it. Now you make it look kosher.
Okay, so you've just given us the political side, and I also want to talk about whether or not the president could fill this position if by not resignation.
Well, the Justice Department, by federal statute, must be run by a human being who has been confirmed by the Senate. We have Jeff Sessions, who's the AG, but he has removed himself from the Mueller probe. So the Mueller probe must be run by someone who's been confirmed by the Senate. If Rod Rosenstein leaves today, the next person in line is Noel Francisco. If he otherwise doesn't want to do this or can't do it, the next person in line is Stephen Engler. Beyond that, there's no one up there that I am aware of who has been confirmed by the Senate, so one of the two of them would have to do it. I don't think it brings about any change in the Mueller investigation at all. No, I don't. Mueller has profound legal and ethical obligations to seek the evidence that he has been charged with seeking and to prosecute if he feels he has a strong enough case. And I don't see his new bosses, if there are new bosses, interfering with that.
Before I pass this on real quickly, a quick follow. What about the new deputy AG then firing Robert Mueller? Is that possible?
Yes. Yeah, the president can instruct Rod Rosenstein to fire Bob Mueller, and the president can instruct the new deputy AG to fire Bob Mueller. Look, the president will eventually want his own deputy AG. No way the Senate is going to confirm that person between now and the midterms. They're probably not going to confirm that person between now and the new Senate coming in right after the first of the year. And they might be confirming two people, an attorney general as well as a deputy attorney general that time.
Can I ask you real quick, because this is Melissa, you say that the president wants his own person in there as deputy AG, but technically Rod Rosenstein is his own person.
Yes.
Because Jeff Sessions picked him,
yes,
wanting somebody who is sort of a career in the department who could kind of give him the ins and outs, right?
All of that is correct. You know, the president has this attitude about loyalty that even if you are my person, even if I made you the attorney general, even if I made you the deputy attorney general, if your behavior manifests disloyalty as I define it, I don't like you staying there. But you are quite correct, Melissa. The president nominated and the Senate confirmed Rod Rosenstein. Jeff Sessions suggested him because Sessions has been in the Senate for 24 years, even though he's a former prosecutor himself, and he needed an old hand, so to speak, to be his chief operating officer of the Department of Justice, which is what he got in Rod Rosenstein.
Judge, Chris Bedford here. Looks like I'm missing some great weather back in D.C. So, Noel Francisco, this guy is a rock-ribbed conservative. He's a Scalia clerk, Federalist Society kind of guy. If he were to take over this job, were this actually to be a true story, would he need to be reconfirmed by the Senate, or is he already a political appointee and he's able to do the job?
So he then becomes, that's a good question, Chris, thank you for it. He then becomes the acting deputy attorney general and remains as solicitor general. He does not need to be reconfirmed. Trump can keep him in that position for the duration of Trump's presidency, or he could nominate someone else for that position pending confirmation by the Senate.
All right, Judge Andrew Napolitano, I'll see you next hour as well as we break it down as the story moves forward. Thank you very much.
We are finally hearing from the president on this. He says that this is a sad situation and something he thinks should be looked at.
He was hired by Jeff Sessions. I was not involved in that process because, you know, they go out and they get their own deputies and the people that work in the department, and Jeff Sessions hired him. We are looking at it, Geraldo. It's very early. We just read the reports, you know, very shortly, the various reports that came out and have been coming out. And we will make a determination. And I'm sure you're going to be very, very early on as to those that know. But it is certainly a very sad story when you see it.
There's been a lot of back and forth about the manner in which these things were said. A source in the room for one meeting where the Deputy Attorney General reportedly suggested wearing a wire to secretly record the president and invoke the 25th Amendment is not denying that these things were said, but to Fox and other media outlets, sources have said that the comments were made sarcastically. The New York Times is standing by its reporting. They say this story is based on months of reporting and, quote, the DOJ claimed that Rosenstein was sarcastic when he suggested he wear a wire on Trump is not supported by our reporting. Rosenstein says the Times report is factually incorrect. The Deputy Attorney General oversees the special counsel's Russia probe. Some say this report could be used to justify firing Mr. Rosenstein. Democrats, like Senator Chuck Schumer, they say that cannot happen. Senator Schumer tweeted that it would be corrupt. Republicans are saying the opposite, that if the allegations are true, it would perhaps be appropriate for Rosenstein to lose his job. But as you said, Eric, they're saying that right now they should really just wait and see. Robert Costa of the Washington Post reports that President Trump told several people on Friday and Saturday that he does not plan to fire the deputy AG.
The New York Times has sparked an uproar with a story based on unnamed sources saying Rod Rosenstein spoke last year of wearing a wire to secretly tape the president. He was considering that and said he might consult with cabinet members about challenging President Trump's fitness for office through the 25th Amendment. The Deputy Attorney General called the story inaccurate, and some media outlets are challenging the Times' reporting, but there's no question the piece was a bombshell.
Just the incredible idea that the Deputy Attorney General seriously contemplated, A, taping the president, wearing a wire, and B, trying to get him removed from office is really extraordinary.
Now, let's be clear. If the New York Times reporting is accurate, the president tonight should seriously consider whether Rod Rosenstein should remain on the job.
Emily, bombshell claims, of course, some of them based on sources who have seen a memo recounting some of these meetings by Andrew McCabe, the fired former FBI deputy director. And again, you're back to the question of unnamed sources and where is the right emphasis on this story?
Unnamed sources briefed on a memo who we don't know were in this meeting when these statements were made.
We don't know whether anyone was in the room or not. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And Rosenstein says he was obviously the one doing it. He says that he was being sarcastic and he was joking. And it's just like, what on earth are we supposed to make of the story other than the fact that competing camps in the DOJ are laundering their perspectives through the media, through the Washington Post and NBC on one side, and Rosenstein, the people who are spreading this negative stuff about Rosenstein in the Times. It's crazy.
Just to clarify, Rosenstein is not directly saying he's being sarcastic, but certainly sources maybe sympathetic to him are saying it. So Rosenstein's original denial, I said this on the air, had plenty of wiggle room. He said it was an inaccurate and factually incorrect story. Okay. Sources biased against DOJ advancing their own personal agenda. That's probably true. And he said there is no basis for invoking the 25th Amendment, which is just the present tense. So apparently there were reports that he got called into John Kelly's office, and that produced denial number 2, which was more specific. I never pursued or authorized recording the president, and any suggestion that I've ever advanced for the removal of the president, advocated, for the removal of the president is absolutely false. So that's evolved.
It's evolved a lot, but I think at the end of the day, you have New York Times now coming out and saying, look, even though you've denied this, and we've put your denial in the piece, albeit a few paragraphs down, we stand by our reporting. Mike Schmidt did a lengthy interview with Slate walking through exactly what he meant by background sources. So if Rod Rosenstein's trying to come out and say that this report is false and that we can't necessarily trust it, the New York Times is coming back and they're fighting that hand and tooth.
By the way, even in the second denial, I never authorized, I never advocated, doesn't mean it wasn't talked about. So a senior Justice Department official tells Fox that Rosenstein was in a heated argument with Andrew McCabe about whether he was impeding an FBI investigation of Trump, and and that he sarcastically said, what do you want me to do, wear a blanking wire? Washington Post also gives some credence to sources saying this was sarcasm, and MSNBC has been challenging the story because its own sources are sort of in the sarcasm camp. But as you say, New York Times standing by the story. New York Times reporter Adam Goldman said this was a serious, not a flippant remark. So it brings us back to the question of sources and agendas.
Right. Well, and look, you mentioned MSNBC, for example, and some of these other more left-leaning sources. You know, they want to say that the whole concept of the fact that this could be sarcasm plays into maybe what they want to do because they want to protect Rod Rosenstein, theoretically, right?
Oh, because they don't want him fired.
Right, because they don't want him fired. And so this is my huge take on this issue. I really see this as sort of the perils of talking about fake news. Right now, this is a story that actually helps bolster what President Trump has been trying to say as far as individuals undermining him within the justice system. But it's coming from the failing New York Times. How can you say that this is legitimate if you have illegitimized this particular news outlet and you've also said that, you know, leaks and anonymous sources are bad until they're good?
You stole my next question, which is the president often beating up on the New York Times, but now if some people in the administration are seizing on it. Well, there's a split. Sean Hannity said Rosenstein should not be fired. This is a trap. Laura Ingraham said he should go. And so the Times' credibility, it all depends on whether the story is helping you or not, or hurting you in terms of whether you cite it.
Yes, but going back to what you were saying about calling the New York Times the failing New York Times, we've seen this time and time again. When it comes to President Trump, he's going to use whatever rhetoric makes sense for him at the time to support his position at the time, and it seems as though his base doesn't really worry about it, so he doesn't have to be worried about it.
By the way, he is not the only politician who says, oh, the story in the Washington Post is absolutely shows my opponent to be an absolute clown, but when it's against him, it's like, who can believe the Washington Post or the New York Times or CNN or anybody else? Capri Cafaro, Sarah Fisher, Emily Jashinsky, thanks very much for